Picture this: a shallow bend of a river, a line of wagons pulled tight, chained wheel to wheel, 470 men, farmers, not soldiers, waiting in silence. Across an open plain, an army is coming, not skirmishers, not scouts, but thousands of Zulu warriors moving with purpose, filling the horizon. By sunrise, one side will be broken, and history will never agree on why. Blood River did not begin on December 16, 1938. It began years earlier, with pressure, migration, and fear. By the 1830s, Boer farming families were leaving the British Cape Colony in large numbers. They were not unified by conquest, but by resentment. British law, British courts, the abolition of slavery without compensation, and the belief that their language, religion, and autonomy were being erased. They called themselves Voortrekkers, those who move forward. They traveled inland in wagon groups with families, cattle, and iron weapons, searching for land they could control themselves. One of the regions they entered was Natal, fertile, well-watered, already claimed. It lay within the sphere of the Zulu Kingdom. This was not empty land, and to the Zulu state, this movement was not migration, it was intrusion. The Zulu Kingdom did not become powerful by accident. Under Shaka Kasenzagana, it was rebuilt deliberately and violently into a machine that could not tolerate disorder. Young men were taken from their homes and reorganized into age-based regiments. They lived together, trained together, and were forbidden to leave without permission. This was not only an army, it was a system of control. A man's loyalty was no longer to his household or even his chief, but to the king. Marriage, status, and survival all depended on obedience. When Shaka was assassinated in 1828, that system did not disappear. It remained rigid, powerful, and dangerous. His half-brother Dingane inherited the machinery of rule, but not the fear that held it together. From the outside, the kingdom still looked formidable. Inside, it watched him closely. Zulu kingship was not secured by bloodline alone, it was secured by perception. A king who hesitated invited defiance. A king who failed invited replacement. And by the late 1830s, Dingane was already under strain. Foreign families were moving across his borders, not as raiders, not as armies, but as settlers who built camps, brought cattle, and did not leave. To Dingane, this was not migration, it was a test. And tests in the Zulu political world could not be ignored. In late 1837, Voortrekker leader Piet Retief attempted negotiation. Dingane demanded proof of loyalty, the recovery of cattle stolen by a rival chief. Retief complied. In February 1838, a land agreement was signed. Days later, Retief and his unarmed delegation were seized and executed. Zulu regiments were then sent against Voortrekker camps along the Blue Krans and Bushman rivers. More than 500 settlers were killed, many of them women and children. To the Voortrekkers, this was betrayal. To Dingane, it was prevention. Because once Retief walked away with land, armed settlers, and legitimacy, the problem would no longer be manageable. After Blue Krans, there was no return to negotiation, only outcomes. By late 1838, Blood River was no longer about punishment, it was about survival for a king. Dingane had already executed rivals, he had already lost senior commanders. He had already proven he ruled through fear. If he failed to destroy the Voortrekkers now, the regiments would see it, and regiments that stop believing do not wait politely. They choose another king. The army moving to Blood River was not just fighting settlers, it was fighting for Dingane's legitimacy. That matters because it explains why retreat was never an option, why compromise was impossible, and why thousands of men would later walk into gunfire they could not yet understand. On December 15th, Andres Pretorius halted his commando beside the Ncome River. This was not chance. To one side lay the river, swollen by summer rain. To the other, a deep donga, a natural trench, impassable at speed. Ahead, a wide plain with no cover. If an enemy attacked, they would have to come straight on. The wagons were drawn into a tight laager, not a perfect circle, but a sealed enclosure reinforced with chains, timber gates, and interlocked wheels. Inside were roughly 470 armed men, muskets, limited ammunition, 2 small cannon. The plan was simple: hold, fire together, do not break. This was not romantic courage, this was discipline shaped by fear. On December 9th, days before the battle, the commando made a vow to God. If granted victory, they would dedicate the day forever as sacred. For many inside the laager, this was no longer just survival, it was judgment. Before dawn on Sunday, December 16th, mist lay thick over the plain. Beyond it, Zulu regiments assembled, likely between 10 and 20,000 warriors. They were experienced, disciplined, and confident. They had crushed Voortrekker forces before. They expected to do so again. But this ground betrayed them. Zulu tactics depended on movement, encirclement, pressure from multiple directions, collapse through proximity. At Blood River, there was no room to maneuver. They would have to come straight on. When the mist lifted, the Zulu army surged forward, shields raised, spears ready, thousands of feet pounding the earth. Inside the laager, no one fired early. Pretorius had given one unforgiving order: do not fire until told. The Voortrekkers waited until retreat was impossible. Then the command came. The first volley tore through the front ranks. Muskets were loaded not for precision, but for destruction, heavy shot at close range. Bodies fell where formation mattered more than bravery. Still, the Zulu pressed forward, wave after wave. Then the cannon fired. Grapeshot ripped through dense formations, carving gaps that could not be closed fast enough. The killing zone in front of the wagons became impassable, not from fear, but from bodies. For nearly 2 hours, the assaults continued. Inside the laager, women and older boys prepared powder and shot, passing loaded muskets forward to maintain continuous fire. This detail matters. It explains how sustained fire was possible and why collapse never came. Eventually, the Zulu assaults lost cohesion. This was the moment Pretorius had been waiting for. The gates of the laager opened. Mounted men rode out, firing into flanks already under strain. This was not reckless pursuit, it was controlled violence. The Zulu line broke. What followed was not a battle, it was a rout. Warriors fled towards the river. Many were cut down, others drowned trying to cross the swollen water. By midday, the plain fell silent. An estimated 3,000 Zulu warriors lay dead, likely more when later deaths are counted. Inside the laager, no Voortrekker had been killed, only a handful were wounded. The disparity shocked contemporaries. It still does. Dingane's authority never recovered. Chiefs lost faith, regiments defected. When his half-brother Mpande rebelled, many followed him willingly. Dingane fled and later was killed in exile. The Zulu Kingdom survived, but fractured. Blood River did not destroy it, but it broke something permanent. To the Voortrekkers, the meaning was clear. They had made a vow, and God had answered. The river was renamed, the date sanctified, the battle turned into sacred history. But history does not belong to the victors alone. For the Zulu Kingdom, Blood River was not divine judgment, it was disaster shaped by terrain, timing, and firepower. Later generations turned the battle into symbol, proof, justification, often stripping it of complexity. Two monuments now stand on opposite sides of the river. They do not face each other, they stand apart. Because Blood River is not one story, it is many. Understanding it means resisting the urge to turn history into faith or faith into fact. What happened on that plain was neither simple nor pure, it was human, and its consequences are still with us.